Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss the topic, governance in the digital economy, unpacking stablecoin and CBDC regulations. To briefly introduce myself, I'm Sangeeta Ghazi, currently doing PhD in law at the University of Hong Kong, where my doctoral dissertation is focusing on the legal and macroeconomic implications of CBDCs in the context of emerging economies. I'm also a research fellow at Yale Law School and a senior research fellow at Rutgers Blockchain and FinTech program. So in this session, sorry, I just moved to the next slide. We are going to be, I'm going to present the paper that I'm currently co-authoring with Professor Yulia Guseva and Professor Douglas Eakley, who unfortunately couldn't be here. So this paper actually kind of like puts forth a fascinating prospect of the coexistence of central bank digital currency and stablecoins, and how law and regulation can play a significant role to provide that path. So to start off with the problem, currently in the crypto space, there are two things I'd like to mention here. One is risk, and it's not a new thing because it's been since the inception of crypto, how like crypto poses financial risk on the financial sector has been like talked about. But recently IMF has come up with a new publication, and they emphasized on the macro financial risk that crypto space can impose on the traditional financial sector. At the same time, this can be interpreted as the financial innovation as a source of financial instability. However, they noted that crypto assets could de facto constitute a new shadow financial system that could become increasingly important to the real economy. So our takeaway from this is like there has to be some sort of mitigating factor where traditional financial system and decentralized financial system can coexist together. In this regard, I would like to talk about another kind of risk, which is not risk because it's ideological in nature. Even among crypto, I should not say crypto, it's just in general, like among academic researchers or regulators, there are like two opposite views. Some would be like crypto skepticals. They are skeptic about anything that has to do with blockchain or decentralized technologies. And then we have crypto enthusiasts who probably are more passionate about the innovation and sometimes undermines the role of law and regulation that can take place to promote responsible innovation. So in our paper, I belong to the middle ground, and I constantly try to look into the ways that can mitigate these two opposing views. And we took Hayek's approach, who is a renowned economist, and he says markets are inherently unpredictable, and financial instability is also a natural phenomenon. However, within this, market also evolves spontaneously by taking into account decentralized information from the private sector participants. Therefore, there is a way that legacy financial institutions and this new emerging alternative financial ecosystem can actually coexist together. So building on this theory, our paper presents three core arguments. First, stablecoins can provide a cost-effective tool for central banks, and the underlying technology and the various applications can serve for central banks with some valuable reference points, and that can also allow them to thoroughly evaluate the advantages and drawbacks associated with this novel technology. Second, the coexistence of stablecoins and CBDC as a natural consequence may give rise to some political and currency competition, and that can happen domestically and also internationally. However, it can also reinforce the use of particular currency, for example, United States dollar. To curb this market unpredictability, a robust regulatory and oversight framework can be instrumental that can also mitigate some of the risk associated with this market unpredictability. So I personally love history. I think history teaches us everything. And therefore, we took some of the inspiration from the history and tried to show how public and private monies or public or private institutions actually coexisted together, even in the past. So there is no way we should actually compete with each other. We can actually work with together. So just to give an example, when the US government first started minting coins, so they used to take that gold, and they used to use copper, gold, and silver. So for coppers, they would that would be self-sourced. However, for silvers and gold, they would rely on individuals or merchants who would possess those gold coins from commercial transactions or from foreign transactions. So that also shows how government would actually collaborate with each other. The second historical instance is the issuance of greenback in the United States. That's the first real paper money with the legal tender status in the United States. That happened in 1862. Although the purpose of greenbacks was to solely finance the Civil War, it showed some significant success, especially obviously in financing the war, also to pay off the government's debts. However, one thing we should note here is during that time in the United States, the monetary system was dominated by the state chartered banks, and the notes or currencies that were in circulation, those were issued by the state banks. So here, I think the example is sort of reverse, because public money started it's kind of followed by the private monies. Although this created frictions in the system because state was regulating the monetary laws. Therefore, a lot of times, notes or coins issued by one state bank would not be accepted in another state, or sometimes they would accept it at a discounted rate. So, based on this historical background and also Hayek's theory, our research is have three hypotheses. Number one, the coexistence and codependence of public and private money forms a symbiotic relationship between centralized authority, means public authority, and decentralized private innovations led by private sectors. As a natural consequence, this form of coexistence and codependence between public and private monies can lead to a period of financial instability, which we call an unpredictable market condition. Can also be called a market correction mechanism. However, it's not necessarily bad, because this can give valuable insights to public institutions regarding the political and economic aspects of a new form of money. To curb some of these unpredictable risks, law and regulation can serve as a tool for central banks to ensure the soundness of the monetary system and contain some of the risk arising from such coexistence and codependent relationship. I said I love history. So just to prove the point of financial instability, I would like to go back to 1863 again, when, as I mentioned, that greenbacks demonstrated some sort of like success. So government, also at that time, the whole monetary system during the free banking era was kind of like in, not, I don't want to say like destabilized, but it was just like there was no uniformity. So the government wanted to bring some sort of uniformity in the monetary and the banking system in the United States. So they enacted the first act, which is called like National Currency Act. By this act, they established the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller Office, which was authorized to provide federal charters to national banks. And these national banks were authorized to issue a uniform currency. The intention of the act was to discourage public to hold state bank issued monies. So they first imposed a 2% tax on the possession of those notes. However, the act wasn't like fully successful because people were still using state bank monies. So the next Congress passed the National Banking Act in 1864. They incorporated some of the capital and reserve requirements for banks, and they also imposed a 10% tax on the state bank notes that eventually eliminated those state notes. By the end of 1864, 63 banks were granted federal banking charters, which basically paved the way for the establishment of the modern banking system in the United States. During this like shift, when government was trying to formalize and sort of like reform the whole system, there were like constant panics and crises. There were several. I just mentioned two, 1893 and 1907, because these two crises were kind of like significant, because this pushed the government to take actions to kind of formalize the whole system, and that led the establishment of the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913. So, at the same time, since central bank became the main authority to regulate the monetary sector of the country, they also have the capacity to act as the lender of last resort. This is the result of like in the instabilities that were happening during the time. Banks were like out of money and they needed money, so the central banks become the lender of last resort, so that they can inject emergency liquidity into the system. One hand, definitely this, I'm not going to talk about moral hazard because that's my favorite topic. So anyway, this basically like impacted the whole system in the sense that more banks were established, more credit institutions were established, and there are other non-financial institutions later were established, and all these institutions were private in nature, and they had some sort of like capacity to generate money, which are either in credit form or bank deposit form, and every one of these money is private in nature. So the current payment and settlement systems, we probably all know, it's just like have three different kind of monies: public, issued by central banks; private, issued by commercial banks, either in credit or bank deposit form. And we also have credit card companies that generate money in the form of credit. In the beginning of 2000s, I will say, like with the emergence of fintech, we have another category of money, which probably we don't still like categorize it under this but it is fintech or big tech credit, which is essentially backed up by the commercial banks, but they also have the capacity to generate credit. So we classify this also as a private form of money. And now we are living in the age of distributed ledger technology, bringing revolutionary changes in both the public and private sector, and it is also bringing changes in the whole monetary system as well. Although we can debate like whether cryptocurrency or stablecoins is a money or not, but then again, money is a social construct. Like if you trust money, if you trust something as a money, it is money, but that's another legal debate. I'm not going to do that. So when we talk about digitalization, especially like using of technology in public sector, the first thing that comes up to our mind is the central bank digital currency. When I was listening to Scott today from Bank of Canada, and I was like, okay, he's like mentioning everything that I was about to say, so I'm just going to skip everything. But another thing, do I need to, okay, I will just define it a little bit. I'm not happy with the definition though, because it is not uniform. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to say it like it's the digital representation of central bank money. It is differentiated from cash because it's digital in nature. And it is distinguished from other forms of digital currencies because it is issued by the central bank. One thing I would like to say that much of the discussions of central bank digital currency still now revolves around technological features, which is okay because it is still new. So, and we are still trying to figure out like what technology can like add to the monetary system. However, we sometimes kind of like undermine the role of law and regulation. The reason why I'm saying that, because if you think about money, I mentioned it before, that trust and public confidence are two important things. And who do you trust more? I mean, a lot of times when central banks were not in place, banks were going through this liquidity crisis, and they didn't have anybody to go to for money because who's going to give them money? So central bank became the lender of last resort. You know that there is like an ultimate authority which can give you, if they want, the emergency liquidity. So money, in my understanding, should be backed up by a central bank because you get the ultimate legitimacy, ultimate confidence from an authority who probably can do something in the moment of crisis. So law and regulation can inject that sort of like trust and confidence in the society. It's not the only factor, but it can be a main factor, especially in a democratic country. Scott was saying that like Bank of Canada still have the authority to issue CBDC. And IMF also said so. In 2021, they said that like most of the central banks were not authorized to issue CBDC or their existing laws is opaque. So in our paper, we highlight that this legal status of CBDC is instrumental because number one, it can delineate the relationship the CBDC has with the country's monetary laws, and also its relationship with the other private forms of money. And it can also give some sort of clarity how it will work in an existing legal framework. Because we know, like, if you look at the design of CBDC, the interaction actually can vary, provided that what kind of CBDC we're talking about. A token-based CBDC will not act similarly like an account-based CBDC, especially if you think about the central bank's balance sheet. So those are the things, I'm just giving one example, but those are the things those are important to determine in order for the central banks to adopt and to diffuse new forms of money in the monetary system. A CBDC also needs to function within a clearly defined framework that preserves users' right to privacy, and also their ability to choose CBDC or any other forms of money. So I'm also not happy with this stablecoins definition. Probably I'm not happy anyway. But maybe it's because of my PhD. It's like so many definitions you read, and then sometimes I lose my mind, like, okay. Anyway, good thing is that we somehow like come up with like a simple definition just to satisfy the audience. So stablecoin is a type of digital unit that is basically designed to maintain its stable value. It can be backed up by a reference asset or a pool or basket of assets. It doesn't, okay, the second line probably people will not like it, but anyway. So the ultimate objective of a stablecoin is to maintain a stable value. Since the market is growing, there is also a concept of global or systemic stablecoin. Financial Stability Board defines global stablecoin to mean a stablecoin with a potential reach and adoption across multiple jurisdictions and the potential to achieve substantial volume. As of now, our best guess is, given PayPal's consumer base across the world, since Facebook's DM still haven't taken place, so our best guess is PayPal's PYUSD could be a global stablecoin or systemic stablecoin in the future. So currently there is no legislation that determines the legal status of stablecoins in the United States. The regulatory regime is quite fragmented. However, there are some legal and regulatory developments going on around the world. I think Sarah probably talked about a lot. I just mentioned like two here. So the EU becomes the first region to develop a definitive law that designates stablecoin as either e-money token or asset reference token. In the UK, the stablecoin under the bill is classified as a payment token, and both UK and EU law recognizes or anticipates the emergence of a global or systemically important stablecoins. So personally, I believe, and I can probably back it up, money has evolved in the past, and money will evolve in the future in one way or another. So the question is now, how? So we ask this question and we kind of like present three, not scenarios, but like we ask ourselves like, okay, how it can happen. So first we highlight in our paper that the co-presence of stablecoins and CBDCs will hinge or depend on its wider impact on the payment system, domestic or international payment system. And these, for stablecoins or any kind of like private money issuers, the dynamics of trust may also depend on like who is issuing stablecoins. There is a reputation factor here. You will trust more if PayPal, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be biased here, it's just like because of their wide consumer base, if PayPal or Facebook issues a stablecoin, public will tend to believe it more. I don't have any data on this, I'm just like saying from a general public. And also how they interact with the existing monetary system or existing legal system. First, any sort of private money, and the stablecoins as well, they should have the convertible value because it has to be convertible into fiat money or central bank money. And that money also has to have the ability to pay off debts. This is also, from an economic point of view, this also constitutes the aspect of a sound money, or the more trusted money. So paying off the debts is very important. Another key factor is the interoperability between CBDC and stablecoins or any other private forms of money. I'm not going to talk about the technical standards of it, because I'm pretty sure like we're going to have more discussions, and we already had discussions on that. But that factor will also kind of determine the fate of this coexisting, codependent relationship between stablecoins and CBDCs. And there is a possibility that the development and endorsement by stablecoins by multinational corporations will encourage their adoption for cross-border transactions, or even as an alternative currency with certain sovereign jurisdictions. Not going to be detailed on that, but if anybody wants to discuss it with me, definitely I'm happy to talk about it. The second point of like how it's going to happen is the public-private partnership. And as I mentioned it before, that it has happened in the past, so it's going to happen in the future as well. Still now we have this tension between public authorities and private institutions, but there should be some way they can work. I just presented 3 scenarios here, but it is not limited to that. It can happen in several other ways as well. Commercial banks are doing tokenized deposits. They are collaborating with central banks or like private institutions. BIS is collaborating with other central banks for the interoperability of CBDC and stablecoins. So it's happening everywhere. I guess like we should just like find a way so that everybody is kind of like aligned with what they want when it's about digitalization of the monetary sector. So I'm hopeful that it's going to happen in the future. But we are not anticipating, but that could happen, that because of the coexistence of CBDC and stablecoins, there could be like a period of financial instability. And the financial instability in the sense that I would present it again like some of the things that could happen. It might not happen. We don't want to be like, I'm not here to say that I'm right or wrong. But because of the novelty of the design, and because of the interoperability that's sort of like involved in this scenario, there could be a potential change in the dynamics of the international monetary systems. This can also pose a threat to the dollar-based settlement system. It can also reinforce the use of the dollar. So there are like multiple scenarios that can take place. For emerging economies, that can also cause capital flight, because in the moment of crisis, people probably will shift to the stronger money. So that's also a scenario for the coexistence. And even among central banks' money, the potential, it can potentially, we already talked about capital flight, and it can, okay, let me just rephrase it. In a national system, when you have like public money and you have private monies, and they all compete with each other. So according to Hayek's theory, if that happens during the moment of like, let's say, unfavorable monetary policy or inflation is happening, people will also have the ability to choose other forms of money. So people will trust less central bank money and will trust more the private forms of money. So for central banks as well, it can kind of like, can be challenging to maintain the trust and confidence of their own money. So as I said, like it can also happen like internationally. I mentioned like currency competition and also like capital flight. The last thing is kind of like probably like, I don't know, it's kind of more controversial, but that's something I'm more interested in. I wrote recently a paper on de-dollarization, and I got sort of like more, anyway. So geopolitics and political economic
Sangeeta?
implication of the coexistence.
Sangeeta?
Sorry, I'm over the time.
Yeah, a little bit. If you could wrap up real quick.
Yeah,
that would
sorry.
be great.
It was my last sentence, and as you can understand, I got like super passionate about the topic. So the last point is also kind of like open-ended. It can happen or it may not happen, but these are the unpredictable or a period of financial instabilities that can cause because of the coexistence. However, just to wrap it up, there is a way to peacefully coexist together, and then this law and regulation, regulatory clarity can pave the way for that peaceful coexistence. So, yep, that's my presentation. And